The next day, John was there again with 2 of his disciples. When he saw Jesus passing by, he said, "Look, the Lamb of God." When the 2 disciples heard him say this, they followed Jesus. Turning around, Jesus saw them following and asked, "What do you want?" They said, "Rabbi, where are you staying?" "Come," he replied, "and you will see." So they went and saw where he was staying, and they spent that day with him. Over the past 2 to 3 years, I have found my head turned and my heart caught by the transformative glimpse of God I have experienced through Christian community. Like the 2 disciples, I have felt this glimpse feed a deeper curiosity, prompting me to follow and ultimately be invited to come and see. To this end, this 2023, I am embarking on a 6-month journey to dwell with various Christian communities. On the way, I'll be sharing interviews with community members, founders, and leaders to learn more about the blessings, challenges, and wisdom these dwelling places of God hold. In doing so, I hope to inform how it is we might nurture people and communities to be transformative manifestations of God, offering a glimpse of the divine and inviting people to come and see God's loving dwelling place.
So, hello, I'm Sophie and I've been part of this LoveBristol community house for 3 years. I've really enjoyed my time here. I moved in during lockdown and that was a really amazing experience of actually living with people and having that real intentional friendship and being able to really get to know one another. And we ate together and we hung out together in the evenings and we played a number of board games and we just kind of really enjoyed having that time with each other, which was obviously living on your own over lockdown would not have been as nearly as fun. And I'm so glad I moved in then. I've then continued to stay around. We've had a number of people come and go over that time. Which has obviously been exciting and a challenge at times, particularly when the house is quieter. It's a very different vibe to when it's a full house. So most people we've had in this house in the November lockdown, we had some extra people come and stay for the month, was 11. Wow. It's normally a house there are 8 bedrooms plus a guest room, so normal capacity, obviously without any married couples, is 8. Obviously we could well be a house full of 9 at the moment if we have all our rooms filled. We've had some Ukrainians come and stay with us over the last few months, which has been interesting and a challenge. We had 5 of them all arrive at one point, ready in preparation to come. They're having to run a kids camp over here, which they were partnering with LoveBristol to do. LoveBristol had gone out and basically gone and done the UK government's job that basically every other government was doing, sending their government people out to go do visas and stuff, and here at the LoveBristol we're out there kind of helping support Ukrainians to find hosts and sponsors and to bring them over here.
Yeah, and before we go any further, would you mind describing what LoveBristol is? I realise that's a huge question, so I can prompt you along the way, but how would you describe what LoveBristol is?
So LoveBristol is a church and a charity which has a number of social enterprises. So we've got like a cafe, got a second-hand furniture shop, we've got a vintage kind of second-hand clothes shop, which also does like a women's afternoon for some vulnerable women, which they can do some craft and really have a real safe space for them. So we've got a second-hand furniture shop, which also is a real welcoming space for a number of volunteers with learning difficulties and is able to include them and enable them to kind of engage in volunteering and contributing to the community. It's also then become a real open space for people to come in and talk, and they now have like a corner of where they have chairs so that people can come in and just chat and just catch up and be a real communal space. Obviously we church on a Sunday, which is a kind of an eclectic bunch of people. We're based down in in a very eclectic part of Bristol called Stokes Croft.
Very colourful.
Yeah, which has a lot, can have a bit of deprivation, but it's also bit up and coming as well. But it's a place where there's a whole variety of, there's a few homeless people, you'll have people with like drug or life controlling issues potentially in the area, but also it's a very artistic and creative area as well.
And the congregation's quite small,
yes.
if I understand rightly.
So yeah, we've probably got about 30 to 40 people on a Sunday, which is fairly small, but actually a really good community that actually you can get to know everyone pretty well. And as part of our service, we'll usually have a bit of time where at the beginning where we'll actually say hello, and then we'll kind of break up into small groups to share kind of what God's been doing in the week, and kind of is a real opportunity to kind of get to know people on a smaller, on a deeper level. And it's usually you'll get a different group of people each time, each Sunday. So, and then people will share if there are particularly any highlight stories from the week, what God's been doing. So particularly some people like you track a story that God's been doing over a number of weeks or a number of months, you're like, oh, there's the next bit in that story.
Oh.
So that could be quite fun.
Wow.
And then obviously a big part of LoveBristol is also the community houses, which I believe there are 10, 11?
12 maybe? There's an ever increasing number.
So would you mind describing the community houses aspect of LoveBristol?
So there's a number of community houses which range in size. So some of them are about maybe 4, I think some of the smaller ones, maybe, or 5. To probably maybe 6 is probably some of the smaller ones, up to like we've got 8 at one of the houses. 87 is a house of 20 odd people when it's full. It is a massive house. And then there is like houses of maybe 8. That's probably goes up to maybe 25, 87, and then Fruit Corner is probably maybe a little bit smaller, so that's maybe more 18 to 20.
And to clarify for people listening, 87 being the number of the house, not the number of people. And then our house is obviously about 8, 9 people. It went full, so currently we've got like 6 of us. Plus one of our housemates is currently stuck in Ukraine, being a Ukrainian. He went back over his birthday and being a fighting age man, got stuck. And would you mind describing what kind of people live in the community houses? From what I've picked up, it's very diverse.
Yeah, so our house is currently just full of young adults. So we've got people, we range from 22 to about 32. We've got both single people and married people, which gives a real variety of life experience. And actually, like we had one of the other community houses around for dinner the other week, and I was chatting to one of them, and was like actually saying they've just had a married couple as well move into their house, having also just been purely like non-married people. And he was saying like actually it's a real opportunity to learn how to do marriage well, and what wisdom you can learn on actually just by observing a married couple in their natural environment and just seeing the communication and stuff, and obviously how they interact. It's going to be a real opportunity to learn something different that you wouldn't get with just living with other unmarried people. And actually but it also is obviously, for those that are obviously married or with families in some of the other houses, it's obviously much more of a kind of intentional sacrifice and decision than obviously when you're not married, obviously, to kind of be living with other people. It's obviously a joint decision that you've taken. And obviously, but it's actually a really rich way of life, that actually to have an amazing group of people around you that can be there for you in your those good days and those bad days, that can really kind of get alongside you and nurture you, and also be other people you can talk to that aren't just your spouse. It could often be kind of quite a exciting time to actually kind of grow, but equally they don't recommend you do it in your first year of marriage, so you have a bit of time to kind of get your marriage settled and stable, cement some really solid foundations, and then after that you're kind of free to.
Because Fruit Corner has 3 families?
Yeah, so you obviously got Greg and Claire. Obviously, they've got their daughter. You've got then we've got a couple of other families with young children and babies.
Yeah, yeah. And I think, just talking to Gwyneth earlier today, there are 19-year-olds who are also part of LoveBristol community houses, and like 60-year-olds.
Yeah,
or...
so yeah, in like 87, the really big house, that obviously has like people in probably their 60s, so a married couple in their 60s, like actually the real breadth of ages. But I think so that you probably tend to get more of the breadth in kind of the larger houses, where there's obviously a bit more scope in that variety of ages, whereas if you really bring a much older person into a house of 6 or 8 and the rest is all young adults, you're not necessarily going to get so much, whereas in a bigger house you can probably have some of those more 30s, 40s, 50s. You can have a bit more some people in the middle. You've got scope for not just 20s and early 30s. You've got maybe some people in that middle phase of life, and then some older people as well.
And I don't know whether you might be able to answer this question or not, but would you be able to shed light on the kind of application process or the discernment process for people coming into community houses?
So initially, obviously, people would meet with Gwyneth to kind of, and they would have a bit of a chat, explain
what's her community coordinator?
Yeah, probably, or something like that, and kind of someone that kind of oversees the community houses. So yeah, they would meet with Gwyneth, and they would obviously tell them a bit about what community is. There obviously maybe some people that might not even get to the interview stage if they really don't think they're suitable. But yeah, for those that they think have some decent potential and they want to at least kind of get to know, they would have an interview chat and obviously find out find out a bit about their life story and probably what they're looking for, and explain what community is and kind of explain what the expectations are, and then probably after that. So they might also then be encouraged to come visit the church as well, and kind of, because we're encouraged to be part of the church as well, and kind of to have that overlap of life with the other community houses and other people in the church to kind of, and so each of the community houses we're currently on a rota with the house groups for 7 for Hospitality, which gives us a bit of a chance to kind of connect in with the church as well and get to know people, and so you get a bit more of that overlap, and it's not just, you're not isolated as a community house.
Really interestingly, talking to Gwyneth, a lot of communities that I've visited will struggle with recruitment, and it seems like here there's actually a lot of interest. Well, there's a lot of interest because people are looking for cheap accommodation. So Gwyneth was saying that she was, I don't know whether it's this year, but processed 157 applications or something, which has been whittled down to 35 who might be potentially suitable. And I know that she puts in a lot of thought and prayer into where someone might fit, because there's a lot of care taken into making sure that someone's in the right house, essentially, and the importance of, that there is discernment.
So obviously they obviously would be then recommended maybe a house or two to visit, to kind of go around for dinner and meet the people in the house, and then also individually, obviously, house leaders might, before they get to a dinner, might have a bit of a chat with the potential person and just get to know them and just find out what their expectations are and a little bit what they're looking for, just to check whether they feel like they would fit the vibe of the house. And just to find out a bit about them, so then you obviously can start some conversation on the evening to just kind of really kind of get to know them and kind of pull out some of the more the points you want to pull out to kind of actually get them to share something of who they are with everyone else, so everyone else gets a chance to really get to know them and can assess then whether they're the right fit. And it might be then, particularly if they're then local, they might come around for dinner another time, or they've come from a bit further away, they might stay a night and then give a bit of chance for them to kind of get to know the house and really know the people. But obviously, then after they've obviously been around to the house for dinner, an opportunity for everyone to then have a bit of time to pray, reflect, both, and the decision both made collectively as a house as to whether you'd like to bring them in, and also obviously them to decide whether this is the right house for them.
And am I right in thinking that across the various community houses, maybe not people sleeping as part of the community houses, but it sounds like they've also been places for people recovering from drug addiction, or even kind of currently suffering with drug addiction, or it sounds like they've also been quite open doors for people who need somewhere to belong.
So certainly over the years there have been various people that have come in, obviously as and when obviously a house feels they can offer that, because obviously there may be some houses they've got a phase where actually they've got a vulnerable person already in the house, whether that's young children, or people with learning difficulties, or like people obviously maybe refugees or other people that kind of need a little bit more support. And therefore it may be at a time when, or you were a very small house and therefore it's much more of a burden on the house. You want to be able to do it when you've got enough people around to be able to support and care for them effectively.
That's really helpful.
So we had, at one point, we had hosted like a guy that was homeless for a couple of nights. He stayed with us for a couple of nights and kind of, it was a real kind of opportunity to kind of do something a bit different. And as a community, we have in the past gone out and done a soup run with one of the other community houses. So we've made up soup and sandwiches and hot drinks and then gone out and given that to the homeless as part of a very established charity in Bristol that do it every night of the year. So we did it like once a month.
And then in terms of, would you mind describing what the community rhythms are in the community houses? Kind of life, what is life like?
So we eat together Monday to Friday. In some other houses they'll also then do a Sunday. And then obviously the weekends is usually people cook for themselves, but equally if people are in and around, they might group together and cook in like a pair or a three for them or for a couple of other people. So it's an opportunity to kind of be a bit more free form with the cooking rather than necessarily this is the nominated person cooking for the night. And so now we have a great big chalkboard in our house where we cooking rota, so we can put who's cooking and you know whether people are out for dinner, whether they're like a saver, whether you've got any guests, and a space for any notes that people need to know.
I love community boards, and this is the most epic community board which I've ever seen.
Yeah, so we've also got space for some important dates, for the birthdays, for the chores, so that we each have a few chores to do around the house to keep the house clean and tidy, and then obviously after dinner we'll all clear up and the person who cooks gets to be out of washing up and clear up.
Which is fair.
Because they've given probably, certainly on when you've got a full house, probably when our house is big, fuller, it's usually you probably want an hour or so to cook. And then also on the light night when you've maybe got say 4 or 5 people, you can probably do it half an hour, 40 minutes. So it's a fair time commitment, obviously, once a week cooking. But obviously then you're being cooked for the other nights of the week.
Exactly. And would you mind, it sounds like each community house also has a house night a week. Would you mind describing what that is?
So once a week we'll have a time when we all commit to being in. So ours is currently on a Wednesday. It has previously been on a Monday because that's what it suited. And so it's a chance where we'll obviously all be in for dinner, have a chance to kind of catch up and share where we're all at. And we might do some worship, we might do some prayer. So at the moment we're just doing testimonies because we've had a lot of new people come into the house. So it's a real chance to get to know everyone. We've also over the last few weeks done some vision stuff. So we've kind of started to think about where we want the house to go, what we'd like to do as a house. Obviously, there's a new group of people. It's a new exciting season where we can actually these are some of the things we'd like to do in terms of how we'd like to connect with each other. So we started up a Thursday morning porridge and Bible. So we read a chapter of John and discuss it over some porridge.
Oh, it's amazing. Porridge with John.
And so that's been really nice, just to kind of as a chance to kind of spiritually kind of just connect during the week. And then we usually have some prayer as well on house.
And in terms of the support available to you as community houses, so Gwyneth is the community coordinator, and she sounds like quite present. And would you mind describing, for example, how she checks in on the community houses or how support works?
So I'm one of the leaders with 2 others who are a couple, and I was leading for them on my own.
What does being a leader mean?
So that would probably be being a bit of a go-between LoveBristol and people in the house. It's doing obviously a load of the admin, so doing all the finances and the bills. Because we have one house account that everyone pays their bills money into, and then we pay all the bills and we buy all the food out of that. So all our shopping's communal. And so there's a bit of obviously admin in terms of doing the bills and stuff and just making sure everyone's paid their bills money. And just kind of checking that we're on track financially. There's obviously also there's pastoral work in terms of obviously making sure everyone's contributing and feeling part of the community, and just kind of checking in on people, which can vary. Obviously, if you're in a smaller house, it's probably a lot more noticeable if someone's off. But obviously in a house of say 20, you might not necessarily notice so much, and so therefore there's also someone that can be there to kind of be a mediator if there are any disputes or issues, which is obviously particularly helpful if you've particularly got say 2 people that are more than one person leading Then if you've got an issue with one leader, you've got someone else you can go to. But then equally, if you didn't want to actually speak to leaders, you could go to Gwyneth. But also, so that's kind of, but then also just keeping track of the vision and just making sure we're on track vision-wise, that we're kind of functioning effectively as a community house. So yeah, there's a kind of spiritual, kind of practical and kind of pastoral bits.
And then it sounds like Gwyneth and Doug try and attend the house dinners.
Yeah, so they'll come every few months, they'll come for dinner. So they came a bit more often whilst it was just me leading, and we were probably in a bit more of a kind of interim phase of leadership. Now that we've got stable leadership, they want to come again soon, and just kind of have a chance to just come in and check and just catch up with everyone and just see how the house is functioning. But also as leaders, we have a leaders WhatsApp group that we can all share things in, and obviously we meet up regularly once a month for breakfast and a bit of a chance to catch up and just connect and just to kind of share things and just have a bit of a chance to kind of hear what else is going on in the other community houses.
And something that I really get from LoveBristol is how it's deeply pastoral, isn't it? And there is a really huge emphasis on just knowing everyone personally and actually being able to know people personally, whether it be through the church or the community houses or the enterprises, which has been really beautiful to see.
So also we'll every month or a few months we'll do like a house day or a house morning, so that we'll put some time aside to do some DIY or gardening or deep cleans of the house to kind of make it a real home. Like I really noticed when I moved in, I'd been in and lodged with a few people that actually this really felt like home. It was a home and not just somewhere you were living. And that's obviously, but if you put that shared effort into doing the house up, so like a couple of months ago we repainted the kitchen and the kitchen cabinets. We picked out a paint colour and repainted that as a house. This Monday just gone, from the bank holiday, we did a load of work on the garden and kind of cut back a load of the weeds and sifted the dirt and kind of levelled that road to put some grass seed, and we'll do some other jobs in the garden to make that a really nice place where we can host people. We want to be a place where we can host guests, and so therefore we had like one of the other community houses around for dinner the other week, and we've got another house coming around in a couple of weeks, which would be an opportunity to kind of just get to know some of the other community houses and kind of get that shared overlap so that people know who else is about.
And what would you say some of the blessings have been of your time in community, and what some of the challenges have been?
Certainly blessings is having an amazing group of people around you, so that when you've had a bad day, there are people you can come home to dinner with and you can process things with and pray about things with. So when my previous job wasn't going so well, so there was some, like when it was ending, it was like, come back, and it was like, there are people here who know me and love me and I can speak to. And you form really good friendships with everyone. So I met up for lunch with one of my old housemates the other day, and went and saw one of my other old housemates. Like actually you form some really deep friendships that can last. But then some people you won't necessarily have connected so well with in a house, and so therefore you won't necessarily, those friendships won't last so much. But there is certainly the scope for an intentionality of friendship that can last beyond just the time in the house.
And I also think with community there's a beauty about getting really close to people who you just wouldn't probably be friends with otherwise. You come across people who you wouldn't in everyday life. Naturally, as friends, we gravitate towards people who are similar to us in some way, presumably.
Even if it doesn't last loads beyond the time that you live with each other, but you can kind of form a really good friendship with someone that you wouldn't necessarily otherwise. And that's a bit different to you.
And I guess, sorry, we didn't clarify this earlier, but I guess a lot of people living in the community houses are working full time. But then it also sounds like if people really can't afford kind of room or something, there is scope where people are housed more charitably, I guess.
And that's probably as a discussion as a house. It's like whether we need to up what we're all otherwise contributing so we can afford to do this, or can we how can we effectively do this?
And would you say that how has it affected your faith, if at all, living in community as part of LoveBristol?
I think certainly it's been a place of healing. Like I struggled with a lot of friendship issues growing up and some bullying, which I think God has been working at over the last several years, but it's certainly been a really healing place for that, and actually like forming a load of friendships. But it can come back, and the loneliness can bite. It's like when the house is obviously when the house shrinks and it's naturally like 3-4 people, you kind of get used to not having necessarily someone around always. But then it was like it goes back to like being a bit fuller. So when we had 6 people and then 3 of them were away for a weekend, it was like, whoa, the house is quiet. And it's like you really know 3 or 4 of them were away for the weekend. It's like, whoa, you really notice it. And so that can be a bit of a challenge, but it makes you kind of realise things, but also it probably kind of helps soften out the sharp edges, I think, with everything where you're kind of having to compromise and work with other people, and kind of in hearing other people's stories of their faith can actually be really encouraging. So like actually it's been really encouraging. Like we had one other person, I did my testimony this week, and we had one other person a couple of weeks ago. It's really interesting just hearing other people's testimonies and being encouraged in that.
Yeah, it's really powerful. Yeah.
And maybe doing things that you wouldn't necessarily put yourself to do otherwise. So I wouldn't necessarily would have done naturally doing the soup run, but actually it was an opportunity to do something different and serve in a way that's not necessarily your natural way.
And then we touched on this a bit earlier today together, but like the houses are quite transient in some way. So you've been here for 3 years, but I guess some people, I don't know, is there like a minimum duration?
So I tend to recommend a year as the minimum commitment. Obviously, some people, obviously, it might be a bit shorter than that, obviously where life circumstances have changed. But we try and aim for something that, at least with an initial intention of a year. Because and I think probably 6 months is probably the shortest you'd realistically want for someone that's meant to be a long-term person and not more of a transient person. Where it's hosting, because we just need someone to host them. Like with some of the Ukrainians, they were here for more of a shorter period until they were moved on to more permanent places. And some people chose to kind of stay longer because they really enjoy being in the house.
Yeah, and how have you personally found that transience? Is it difficult or is it fresh? A mixture of both?
I think it can be a challenge at time when obviously. And we had like 3 people who all move out last summer. Like 2 of them got married to different people. They met in the house. 1 person went off to go travelling around South America. And so, and they were like 3 people who've been around since the beginning of my time here. And so I went from being like one of the kind of middle time frame, or slightly not quite one of the earliest people, and then to being the longest standing housemate. By then. And then we had like someone that I'd been here like 2 and a bit years, then the next person was then, so I joined in like April 20, then the next person was like December 20, and then the next newest people were like July 22. And so we had a massive jump at some point, like after a few people that were kind of come in the middle, had been and gone, like actually, whoa, I've been here a long time compared to everyone else. So it can be exciting, but also you know that for a while you know where everything is and kind of know how everything has functioned. But equally, it's like being open to do things differently when you get a new group of people and a new season. It's like the house ebbs and flows with, obviously, if you've got like a good solid group for a while, then actually that gives you a real scope to build some depth of relationships and to kind of maybe think more strategically long term, so you can maybe plan things for 6-9 months a year rather than we're planning for we can think about the next 3 months as a kind of, this is what we know in terms of time frames we've got with this group of people is 3 months. And you plan on a much more short-term basis, which does enable you to maybe get on and do things in a way that you wouldn't necessarily otherwise, because you've got a much shorter time frame, so you are more intentional in some ways about the time you spend with each other. But also, if you've got a smaller house at that point, then that works all right, because you've got a shorter time frame, you know, then actually you can be intentional, fairly intentional. It's a bit easier to be intentional with each other in a smaller group than a larger group, which has a lot of known transient. And obviously with people getting married and going off travelling, these were well planned out things. So you know 6-9 months before that they're moving out at this point, and so therefore mentally plan and prepare, and so therefore you can start thinking about replacements a lot sooner, rather than if someone then, because obviously it's a month's notice to move out, which obviously gives them a bit of time to kind of, but obviously if people can give more, then obviously it gives it a bit more time to plan and refine people to come in.
And then my mind has travelled back to Gwyn's showing about, because there are other communities in Bristol, so there's YWAM and also
there are some Woodies.
New Wine, maybe, and Woodies.
So Woodies have a couple of community houses which are owned by Mullers. So they've got like our pastor Dave lives in one and has done for like 25 odd years, or some very large number of years. There's raised his family in it.
Yeah, because there's collaboration across the different community groups in
and
Bristol.
I think there's also like a Hope Chapel community house as well. So yeah, we kind of, as well as our leaders' breakfast, so some of our leaders' breakfasts, say once a term, will be a wider network one. So that will be people from some of the other community houses are then invited to come and join with us and kind of chance to share and be encouraged and maybe receive some training now and again on some of them.
Which is amazing. And because also the enterprises that LoveBristol have, like the charity shop and the cafe and the second-hand store, some of the profits of that go to supporting other local charities, right? Yeah. Yeah. Oh, it's lovely. So it feels like there's a real connectivity. And I think Bristol's really unique, actually, in terms of how much it's pioneered community living. It's quite impressive.
Yeah, because I think communities have been going here for 20, 30 odd years probably. And I think there was a big court battle to kind of get them classed as what they are. Because obviously the number of people, and obviously they're not related people, to make them sure they're not HMOs, because obviously we wouldn't meet a load of the HMO requirements, but I think they are technically classed as monasteries, I think, in terms of...
I see, wow, because I was reading a book and she touched upon the fact that, like, legally there are it can be a bit of a battle because laws and things are just set up to suit a nuclear family and that you get into problems sometimes. That's really interesting.
But obviously, and I think because obviously there are therefore certain rhythms we have to meet in order to meet our requirements of being a community house because of that.
Interesting, like what?
So I think there's like learning, prayer, and I think I think probably a bit of outreach stuff. So there is like aspects that we have to meet to kind of function and class as a community.
Classification as a monastery.
To function and class as a community house, which is really interesting.
Yeah. That is fascinating. I didn't know that.
But I think obviously Bristol generally has obviously got a very rich kind of culture of churches working together and leaders across the churches, so charismatic and different, and even so black majority and white majority churches meeting together, leaders to kind of pray and network. That actually is real kind of, there's a lot of church unity that isn't necessarily there elsewhere, which is also probably a real culture that we've had people from a variety of different churches in the house. And so therefore you kind of get to know people from the other churches as well through that. Because people will bring in their friends from their
Yeah. And is there anything which you feel like we haven't covered about LoveBristol which would feel worth mentioning?
Not massively, but I think I've really enjoyed my time here. I moved in and actually had an offer on a house accepted in the beginning of COVID. I moved in and actually turned it down because I was really enjoying my experience of being in community. Yeah. And obviously you've got people that are a bit older that have moved in and actually it's a real intentional decision. Yeah. They've got options. They could equally go and live by themselves and have chosen not to. Yeah. And so you get it can be really exciting when you've got a group of people that are really passionate and can drive things forward. And can actually, this is as a group together, we can do something really exciting here.
Yeah, it's beautiful. I've had a lovely dinner with you all.
And it's so much fun, like the laughter and the fun that you can have with it.
So much.
And it can be a real blessing if you've had a hard day to come and just to really enjoy each other's company and share that time with each other.
Yeah. And what would you say the hardest thing has been about your time in community?
I think probably this is particularly what, as I just kind of stepped into being an interim leader, and not necessarily at this point signed up for like full-on leading, like was obviously navigating, bringing in 5 Ukrainians without knowing quite how long they were staying for, what their level of English was, quite load of the logistics, and trying to then communicate that to everyone else in the house when they weren't. And there were some people were up for it, some people were less up for it, and it's like actually navigating some of the tensions of the house, and like actually something I struggled with and kind of retreated for a bit. It was like just, and then after a while, it's
a lot to manage. That it's a huge amount. And
then when you're the one trying to be the conduit, if like actually if something you're being told from above that actually we've got. There's not really anywhere else for them to go, and so we kind of need you guys to host them.
Yeah.
And so that could be a bit of a challenge. But actually, it was a really exciting time. Once we got them here, like actually a number of them had pretty decent English, and we had some fun times having Google Translate conversations and having some really good, deep conversations with some of them. Yeah. And an opportunity to learn about other people's cultures. And that was actually... The difficult bit was probably in that kind of initial build-up bit, and then again when we were then going to bring it a 12-year-old girl from Ukraine as well, and her aunt, and that was going to be a bit of a challenge, like not quite knowing how long that was going to be for. It ended up not being for, only was like a month or two, much shorter, because I then managed to find a better setting for them. Okay. Obviously being a house full of young adults, it's a very big shift having a child in the house.
Yeah. And thinking back to the enterprises and like the work that people do in the community houses, there are some people who both work for LoveBristol and live in the community houses. So the Second Combing, which is a barber shop, and I can't remember his name, but he's
Antonel
has been part of the community. And then Joy works for LoveBristol.
Daisy, who works in the bakery, she's currently up at Fruit Corner and is moving to go lead one of the with some others, one of the other community houses.
And Dex as well. He works in the.
He works in Habitat. So does Andy. She's the manager at Habitat. She lives in community. So a number of the people, and obviously Greg and Claire, live in community.
Who are the founders?
And I think a number of the other people that probably have lived in community at some point in their life, even if not necessarily in this current season. And so there's been a very rich, obviously, culture of that overlap of like actually people really enjoying being part of the community. But obviously it can be equally, it's also a challenge for those that are then working in the LoveBristol church community stuff, and Flo, who runs Treasure, she lives in community. Really being an opportunity, it's a real challenge to then make sure it's not just you're not just in a LoveBristol circle where you're at church at LoveBristol, so you've got a load of church friends, you're working for LoveBristol, and then you're living within a LoveBristol community house. So you actually you need to make sure you keep friends outside of that circle to bring in and kind of so you're not just in this one bubble. And that can be a challenge for obviously those.
And it's really surprising, like everything which comes out of LoveBristol, given that it is really quite small. And what I found great was, because I asked Gwyneth about, because it's a lot of property really, and it feels like there's a lot of partnerships around like empty vicarages or people who just need their houses looking after and they're happy for it to be used as a community house, and some of the houses are rented, some of them are owned, and I just thought that was just really ingenious, really, use of property. And I've called this podcast Dwelling Place, based off Psalm 84, and also as a reference to God dwelling in community in a special way. And I would therefore like to ask you the question of, where have you found God dwelling, or like where is it that you experience God in your life, in community or LoveBristol?
So I love my worship. So worship is a key aspect, but it's also really kind of felt like obviously God working through the people as well. Like actually you can look back at the scene and actually see the people that have walked through the journeys with you as well, that actually God has kind of used people to kind of really be alongside you in those tough moments. So like I my previous job had just ended, and we literally, and if work turned out, we'd booked our house holiday for that weekend, for the weekend after, which was the August bank holiday weekend a couple of years ago. It was a real amazing time just to kind of get away from everything, but both have time where I could just. I ended up waking up quite on the earlier side both days. We were camping. And just having a bit of time on my own to process things, but also being able to just talk and process with other people that knew me, or we had a few people that had just moved in or were going to move into the house, and so
you went on holiday with the community.
Yeah.
The community.
Yeah, with our house, and so that was a really special time to kind of get to know other people and to process what had just happened in the space of 3 days of kind of being told on the Wednesday my job was ending and finishing it on the Friday.
Was that even legal?
They gave me pay and leave notice. And also in terms of, I was going to be going on to a new contract, so effectively they just never issued the new contract.
Okay, yeah.
So actually by having people around to kind of really process things through and just to be there with you in it all.
Yeah, and it's such a spirit-led community and church, and I've really picked that up, which is really beautiful, and it does have a culture of testimony, which I think is really beautiful and striking, and I can just feel the Spirit moving through people here powerfully. Oh, thank you so much, Sophie.
My pleasure.
Show me your